Thank you, everybody, for attending our Open Space Committee meeting of December 9th. I need to read an announcement that this meeting of the Open Space Committee is being recorded and broadcast on the Town of Barnstable's Government Access Channel. In accordance with Mass General laws, I must inquire whether anyone else is recording this meeting, and if so, to please make their presence known. Nobody? Okay. I just want to go around the room and do introductions. I'm Lev Malakoff, your new chairman. Live in Centerville.
Doug Payson, Barnstable Village.
Kate Gulliver, Hyannis.
Ann Rowland, Centerville.
Charlie.
Burley Lewis, Hyannis Ford.
Jenna Zeno, Administrative Assistant.
And we have some guests, if you could just introduce yourselves.
My name is Dave Lafreniere from the New England Mountain Bike Association.
Kyle Pedicini, the Assistant Director of the Planning Department.
Marie Rizzo from Comaquid, Dave Comaquid Woods.
Steve Rizzo from Comaquid. Donald and Deborah Reynolds, Comaquid.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Has everybody had a chance to? Oh, there's two people at the table we skipped. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Grace Rogers, Property Manager.
David Anthony, Director of Asset Management.
Thank you. All right. Has everyone had a chance to see look at the minutes?
Yes.
Any discussion? Okay. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I move to accept.
Second. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. All right. So we have some interesting topics on our agenda tonight. The first is going to be an update on the so-called Cape Cod Pathways project in town of Barnstable. Just as a little backstory, I and Farley and some others were part of an ad hoc committee that was looking into taking care of the Pathways Network in town some years ago. It's great that now we have a staff member that is going to take on this role because, you know, it's kind of been absent for a while. I do have a present for Grace. You want to pass this down? These are the high-resolution files of the Cape Cod Pathways logo.
Okay.
That I have a designer who actually re-imaged it all because all the logos were low resolution that we could find. So those are yours to use for any signage or promotional materials.
Thank you.
That you might wish to have. So I guess we'll let Grace Rogers take it away.
All right. So again, for the record, Grace Rogers, Property Manager. I'm so happy to be here. We are very excited to pick up the Cape Cod Pathways project as it was left off. We had Friends of Cape Cod Pathways created around 2014, 2016. I know Farley, you were integral in that. And because of COVID and how things went, we are looking to pick that project back up. We have a great relationship with Barnstable Land Trust. We're working in partnership with them for this project. And we're very excited to be sharing an AmeriCorps placement, which they'll be working on a variety of projects, but one of them is looking at the Cape Cod Pathways. So part of the reason I'm here this evening is to update you all because one of your charges is to implement the Cape Cod Pathways. And essentially we're looking to redo the same exercise that we did in 2014, which is to take an inventory of the Cape Cod Pathways from the original plan that was implemented or drafted, not so much implemented unfortunately, because it's a big undertaking, in 2003. And the past 2 decades has been lots of strategic partnerships to continue implementing it. However, it's been discovered that there's a lot of private easements that are required to do this. We're looking to reconfigure that plan to hopefully get outside of easements just because it'd be easier to finish the work that was once started so we could officially have a path that is completed. And we are looking to update any of the trailblazing, signage, logos, and the kiosks that were implemented about a decade ago. And I think that's pretty much it for the general update. Other than that, what we're looking to do after we do the inventory of the trails through this winter and the spring, we're hoping to go to all the key stakeholders with a draft plan that everybody can provide feedback on. And of course, open space is one of those key stakeholders in that relationship.
So just so everybody's still up to speed on this, Ann had sent out, Ann Kennedy, our former chair, had sent out a couple letters some months ago to Mark Ls. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at them. There's a couple of connections in the Pathways network, one in Comaquid that the assessor's maps show crossing private land. I did some research in the deeds and it shows that Flint Rock Road does exist on those parcels. So I don't know if there's an error in the assessor's data, because the deeds show that that way does exist. And I provided that information, I don't know, to a number of people. The other segment is a safety concern at the YMCA crossing at the northern driveway of the Cape Cod Community College. Right, the original pathways as well as the existing pathways crosses at that intersection, and there's no safety features, no crosswalk, no light. It's a high-speed road. It's also a great place for, you know, families and kids that might be going to the playing fields of the community college, to the YMCA, back and forth. So Ann had sent out this letter, and then also received from the president, John Fox of the Cape Cod Community College, support for having safety improvement at that intersection. It's a state highway, so it would be a Mass DOT implementation. So we're really just looking for the town staff to support a safe crossing so that they can forward that request to the state. Because I think everybody's on board with it, it's just a question of starting to move it along.
I can say that land rights and ancient ways and the existence of roads and what rights we have are kind of a specialty of one of the town attorneys, Tom LaRosa. And we're working very closely with him on a number of property issues. This is in the mix for him to give us an opinion. Just because it exists on a map is good, it's a good start. But we need to make sure that through proper research, we know what our rights as the public would be to cross that road. And if it's an ancient way, then how do we determine those? And then we'd have to inform the property owners as to what our rights would be. Sometimes those are pretty simple and straightforward, and sometimes they're a little complicated. So we'll continue to bird dog that particular issue. I believe that it would be the town engineer who would probably create some sort of an endorsement of safety devices crossing the state highway, and we can follow up with Griffin Bowden on that one particularly. And we can flow that up through planning and development so that the support of the department that is most closely associated with the Open Space Committee can make sure that they're involved in the loop at the very least. So Kyle, we'll certainly.
Yeah, it's actually one of the things I was gonna update you guys on tonight. So a request has been made to Mass DOT to install a crosswalk with pedestrian curb ramps and rectangular rapid flashing beacons on Route 132 at the YMCA driveway and Cape Cod Community College. So this is a copy of the request, in case anybody's, it was sent on November 26th to Mass DOT, so I only got one copy.
Wonderful.
It was actually a timely update, so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments or concerns?
I do, and this has been something I've been talking about for several years, but as you're now you're going to have staffing directed towards that issue. It started in Harwich and then Chatham has been very aggressive in signage directing people to where the trailheads are. And I was recently in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, and in sprawling, large-scale areas, brown hiker signs pointing to where trailheads and parking is. And I can just, from my experience, I walk the trails and take care of the trails in Barnstable Village, and I'll come out of a trail frequently and someone will say, "Oh, do you live there?" And I'll say, "No, this is a public trail." The public is unaware that we have a vast network of trails in this town. And I think we need to let them know that there's a public access there.
Yeah, one of the great things that the county just gave Barnstable Land Trust and I are a series of Cape Cod Pathway Trail signs. So that's gonna be part of this implementation project.
Oh,
Where we
great.
were going to be doing that.
Thank you.
And before I forget, if we pass one and take one down, we do a review of the Cape Cod Pathways brochure about every few years. This is the latest one from April of 2022. And we will ensure that's updated after this as well.
And then another issue is making sure that there are connections with sidewalks to the trail network. It's somewhat of a dated model to drive to a conservation area, to park, to walk. And the more we can emphasize connections, and again, I know as the town is working with the state on the route of the Cape Cod Rail Trail, making sure that that's going to connect, you know, so that pedestrians and cyclists can access without going out onto roads. You know, that there's a sidewalk,
Yes.
bike path access.
I will say that the only thing that comes up more often as far as requests to the town than sidewalks are speed bumps. And both of those are a challenge when you think about the size of the town that we have. I mean, you drive up Finney's Lane and you realize that there's no sidewalks on either side of one of the busier connector roads that we
Crazy,
have.
yeah.
And yet there's a reason for that in that property right to the edge of the road layout doesn't accommodate for sidewalks in some of those sections, which would require the town to come up with eminent domain taking and easements, and then you have construction, which is very expensive, and as soon as you put that in, you bring it up to a certain standard, which requires concrete or granite. So there's a philosophical debate. Do you bring sidewalks all the way out to the edge of the road, or do you have a 3-foot grass buffer between? Now you need a bigger right of way, and who's gonna maintain the roadside of the sidewalk? Do you build it at 3 feet, or do you build it at 4 feet, because that's your typical width of a snowplow device? And then as soon as you do that, now you've got kind of a highway shared use path, like you're seeing installed along Bursa's. If you go down Bursa's now, they're installing a major shared use path there, and you see the kind of level of equipment and disturbance and impacts. And I think Paul Graves started that back in maybe 2019, 2018, discussing it, and here we are in almost 2025, and the construction's just beginning. So I think there's a great example there of what it takes to put in sidewalks, and then what's the role in the ongoing maintenance of those sidewalks to be. Doesn't mean it's not important, and it doesn't mean that that notion isn't considered. There's just a lot to it, and we will take that under advisement as we kind of roll out this plan, which will be perfect the day that it gets issued, or as close to perfect as we can, and then the next day immediately becomes obsolete. So we will do everything that we can to incorporate these kinds of ideas and the feedback that we get from all of the stakeholders, not just open space, but BLT, conservation. There are a lot of different internal parts. And then, of course, there's the public that wants certain things. And as land uses have changed over the past 20 years, there's been a different emphasis on how it gets used and who's going to use it. And just recently, there's a new fire chief out in West Barnstable. So for us to make sure that the new fire chief is up to speed on some of the challenges that are out there, on trail names, and just connecting with people as there's turnover is just one point of challenge that we have to deal with. So duly noted, we will take a look at that philosophical idea of sidewalks and conservation areas and things like that, and we'll fold that in.
Thank you.
And one just last thing, I just want to apologize to whoever I should apologize to, but as part of my role with the mountain bike club, we worked with the college authorities and the state to direct the pathways onto trails. If you look at the original plan, it showed people walking in the road, on the pavement. When they built the YMCA, they obliterated the path because the parking lot took it over. So we approached the state to actually create a trail at the corner of the parking lot of the YMCA. So it it's now a nice woodsy experience. So we're hoping those can be included in the update since they exist and they're a nice way to get, through the Pathways Network.
They can certainly be reviewed.
Anybody else, anything else? Okay, so I'm glad David and Grace are here for the next subject. As I mentioned, I'm also involved in the mountain biking club. Dave Lafreniere is in the leadership of the Cape Cod chapter of New England Mountain Biking Club, but he also has a lot of skills in the technology of helping folks navigate around and find problems and hopefully lead folks into helping solve them. So I'll let Dave start talking while I kind of drive.
Good evening, everyone. As I mentioned before, my name is Dave Lafreniere. Nice to see many of you again. I think I was here for a presentation maybe about a year ago. So nice to see everyone again. As Lev mentioned, I come here representing the New England Mountain Bike Association, specifically the Cape Cod chapter. Lev asked me to talk about a process that our organization uses that may be helpful to Barnstable as well as neighboring towns. Obviously, this is just for Barnstable. Back to our organization, for those not familiar with it, we're a community organization that advocates for the preservation of open space for passive recreation. We steward those protected lands, and we work to promote off-road cycling on Cape Cod. Specifically, our chapter does that. You might be familiar with some of our work on Cape Cod. Maybe our name is not familiar to you. Some of the projects that you may be familiar with over at West Barnstable Conservation Area, there's the beautiful Walker Point deck, which has some nice views. There's a picnic pavilion, which is a picnic table with a little roof over it in the Farmersville lot there. Great for picnics and small events. Not too far from there, the Trazer Boardwalk was put in about a year and a half ago. Not only is it a great asset to walkers, bikers, trail runners, it literally is a work of art the way it winds through the marsh there. It's really beautiful. We recently completed an adaptive trail loop, adaptive riding. We work with the Spalding Rehab for physically challenged individuals to be able to get on a bike of some sort and get out and get some exercise. So this route that was created with our organization in conjunction with some people at Spalding Rehab, I believe is one of the only signed loops for adaptive riders in the state. And the signage is going to be a benefit for hikers, bikers, and everyone else also. Sort of as Lev alluded to, we completed a 4-mile trail that rejuvenated some trails that were lost around Cape Cod Community College. There's now a 3-mile loop there that takes the trails off the sidewalks, puts them into the woods, and you can circumnavigate the entire campus staying in the woods. It's a really nice experience. And as Lev alluded to, it might be nice to reroute the Cape Cod pathways onto that wooded trail as opposed to sidewalks and roads through the college campus. We've also done some rehab of trails at Old Jail Lane. Lev mentioned Barnstable State Forest, Hathaway's Pond. We do a lot of charity work in town. We actually have our annual Toys for Tots event at the Barnstable Airport this weekend. Unfortunately, it looks like it may rain again like it did last week. We have our affiliation with Spalding Rehab's adaptive program. We work with neighboring towns to sponsor kids' recreation rides to get kids out on the bikes into the woods. Some places you may have noticed there's some benches out in the woods for trail users to sit. And specific to West Barnstable Conservation Area, that porta potty in the parking lot is not free. And that's something that we pay several $1,000s a year to keep out there. Some of the other things we do, and I know this is sort of patting us on the back a little bit, but I'll get to my point. We do comprehensive trail mapping of all the trails on Cape Cod. Many of you may use apps when you're out hiking or biking. Those apps may be All Trails, Strava, Trail Forks. those trails don't just magically get on there. These corporations are not out mapping those trails for you. That's usually done by our GIS efforts of our organization to put all trails that are literally out there in the woods onto a map, not only for navigation, but for the safety of all users. Let's see. We also sponsor Cape-wide trail maintenance, especially after storms. The majority of our trails on Cape Cod are really maintained by the users. I'm sorry, I forget. What's your name again? Doug. I'm sorry, Doug. Doug mentioned earlier that he does a lot of trail maintenance. Doug is not alone. Our trails don't necessarily get maintained by the municipalities. They're done by the trail users. And we put forth quite a bit of effort into trying to identify and fix those problems. All right. So on to that point, what our organization has done, and this is the point of me visiting today, is we've implemented a Cape-wide crowdsourced trail reporting system. So what we're doing is we started out with, our organization has a Facebook group. We have about 2,700 members just on the Cape. So what we've done is we've introduced them to this third-party software called Trailforks. And there's a phone app, and we've tried to educate some people on how to use this app, that when they're out on the trails, they can report not only trail conditions, oh, the trail's wet today, the trail's dry, it's slippery, but also report there's a tree down across the trail, all sorts of things that we might want to know about to keep the trails accessible, to keep them open, and to keep them safe. Right. So we attempt to leverage all our trail user groups to report on those trail conditions as well as problems. Let's see, where am I? So on their phones, when they come across, let's say, a log across the trail, if it's something that they can't move out of the way easily and they're gonna need some help, they'll go to this app, and on that app, they'll create a trail report, which provides, actually, we don't wanna go there yet, but it'll provide the name of the trail, the status. We have 4 statuses, and they're color-coded. Green means it's all clear. Yellow means there's a minor problem on the trail. Orange means there's significant impediment on that trail. And then a red would mean that the trail is closed, it's not passable. They could also report the condition of the trail. They would take a photo, and there is a little bit of training involved, but we try to set their phone up so that location data is saved when they take a picture. And when they upload it to this little app, the app will point on a map exactly where that blockage is. So our organization will monitor this system, and we'll decide, do we need to dispatch someone out there? The other thing we do is we educate some of our users. They can subscribe to a particular region. So for example, if you live, your backyard is West Barnstable Conservation Area, you could subscribe to that region through this app and set it up that when someone says, there's a bunch of branches on this trail, you'll get an email, and maybe your next hike is to go out there and just move those branches off the trail. And then we also give some training on how to close that report. So the other thing I'll mention is the trail data underlaying this system. If we didn't know where all the trails were, this really wouldn't work well. So I had mentioned that we have created comprehensive maps of Barnstable, and our mapping data shows that we have 160 miles mapped just in the town of Barnstable. Okay. That does include some dirt roads, but 160 miles is a lot of trails to maintain. I've run a couple reports today just to give you an idea of how well this is working. It's fairly new. We implemented this in April of 2023. Since that time, we've made 562 documented house calls, I'm calling them, because somebody reported a problem. 562 times we sent somebody out, they remedied that problem. We currently have 97 open reports in Cape Cod. And you're probably more concerned about Barnstable. Barnstable is sort of a hot spot with a lot of open spaces. I have noted that we fixed 140 since we started this program. There are currently 27 open reports in Barnstable. Those numbers sound like a lot, but the amount of problems fixed is probably much higher than this, especially after winter storms. For example, I've heard potentially 70-mile-an-hour wind gusts on Wednesday night. What will happen after that is,
Here we go again.
that's what we say too. A trail report will come in for a fallen tree across the trail. Someone will go out to fix it, and inevitably, another 100 feet up the trail, there'll be another tree that they'll have to do. It doesn't make sense for them to create the report, then clear the report immediately. So on many occasions when volunteers are out going to clear reports, they come across others and they get cleared without being documented. But there's a lot of work being done on the trails on the Cape Cod. So as I mentioned, the reports are monitored by our organization. In some cases, we can dispatch a volunteer if it's something easy. In other cases, we need to seek approval from the town to perform a certain task. We have different levels of trust with different communities in Cape Cod. Mashpee and Sandwich, we have certain agreements, I don't want to say on paper, but certain understandings of which trails we can go in and clean stuff up on, and which ones they would prefer to dispatch their people. But we attempt to communicate that and coordinate our efforts so that the trails are open and safe. So Lev.
So if you were a user coming to the website, and you were interested in this subject.
Yeah, so you may be asking, how do we see these reports? So this just happens to be the website of our chapter, the New England Mountain Bike Association. Under the Trails tab, we have some information about trail care. So I sort of alluded that we attempt to train people. This brown link right there, how to report a problem on trail forks. If you just click on that briefly, we're not going to do that, but this is essentially a tutorial on how to use the app and what we recommend they do in order to get good data on our end so that we can maintain the trails properly. There's information on how to for them to take the tutorial, learn how to do this, and Lev, you can go back then. And then we also have links to each town on Cape Cod in the current open report. So we're in Barnstable, let's click on Barnstable. And this is gonna bring us to the Trail Forks app. And this is where we're logging this information. And if you click on region in the black there, it'll sort according to region. I think by default, they're sorted by date. So Lev, when you and I talked about this before, I think you mentioned that you and maybe at least one member of the board here went out to take a look at this John Jenkins Trail. If we click on view on the far right, you'll see what the report looks like. So there's a picture here and it shows what the problem is. We have a trail name, the status, somebody, the person who discovered this thinks it's a very significant issue, so put it in as an orange. And you'll notice there's a map there, and that red dot shows pretty close to the exact location of this fallen tree. And what would happen is, once we determine how we're gonna remedy this, we probably send someone out, and it certainly looks like a chainsaw effort. In some communities, we may need to consult the town and say, hey, we'd like to take a chainsaw and take care of this. In other communities, we have access to certain trails where they're like, yep, go do your thing. Our volunteers have insurance through our organization, so there's no worry about liability concerns. They would go out, clear this, and then what they would do is that yellow button says add new report. It's a little different on the app, but essentially they would add a new report and they would set the status back to green, all clear, and maybe make a note, use chainsaw to clear a tree, put it on the side of the trail, something to that effect. And then it would disappear from that report that we just saw. So again, this application is not something that we've written or we have a whole lot of control over. We're making it work. We've sort of modified the way we want people to use it for our own means. But it does have its glitches, and people have probably heard the acronym GIGO, G-I-G-O, garbage in, garbage out. We're crowdsourcing this data. So not everybody has the same level of technology or knowledge or training on this. You'll see some stuff, there's a bunch of, somebody who obviously was hiking in Willow Street and they know about this project and they wanted to do a good deed and let us know that there were some trees down, but they didn't attach their pictures properly and they didn't leave us a description. So in this case, it's usually my responsibility to vet, maybe I know someone in that area and I say, hey, next time you're out on the bike or you're out for a hike, can you take a look around and see if there's any problems? And if there's not on that trail, maybe you could clear that and we can kind of clear it. But we have to deal with the quality of the data for the most part. It's pretty good, but it's better than no data at all. So we just looked at one of those. There was another report on there. For example, the Walker Point Trail is another thing that I think was,
Where's that?
it's fifth down, sixth down. If you click on the right side there, here's a slightly different type of report, and it's a little hard to see in the picture, but you can see the kiosk map board is either rotted out or somebody vandalism or whatever.
It's plastic, so it's not rotted. It's just
Okay.
been vandalized and pulled out of the ground.
So this is a slightly different type of report. It's not really a natural occurrence where there's a tree across the trail. Again, we like to put these in there as placeholders because this is something that we would want to consult with the town and say, hey, do we have permission to come in here and either replace it or fix it, maybe just replant it. So that's a different kind. And I think there was one more that I wanted to look at. And it's actually one that David and Grace and Lev and I had met on at some point, and we just kind of put it in here. It is the second one, Danforth Trail. So this is another placeholder we had met. There was some concerns on this trail called Danforth Trail that it runs by the runway at the airport. And the concerns were that the trail runs fairly close to the runway, which is an active runway. Our organization suggested, I think we came to an agreement that it would be nice if there was a split rail fence there. So we have a placeholder project that we're willing to do the work for this project. I think we're just trying to decide how we can get some materials. But this is just another type of report that we have in place that the system will allow us to maintain and us to keep track of projects. So obviously, well, not obviously, but we don't expect the town to implement this system. But I think our organization, what we would like to do is to have some coordination and cooperation between whether it's particular boards, committees, individuals, and our organization so that we can coordinate taking care of all these problems. Currently, it looks like there's 27 open issues in Barnstable. Most should exist. Maybe some are already cleared out. Maybe some don't exist. But we're keeping track of them, and we want to be cognizant of not stepping on any toes. But we'd also like to get things cleaned up. So we just wanted to raise awareness that this is out there, and this is something that our organization is doing, and we're hoping to have some other towns coordinated on this, so Cape-wide, we can keep our trails open and clear. Yes, Bev.
So who monitors this in order to make sure that the issues are addressed? You do?
Me, yeah.
Okay.
Every morning, I check the report, and by default, it sorts by report date. So I can look at the top of the list, and I can see if anything came in overnight. And actually, can we sort that by report date again?
Yeah.
And then the one with the check by it, what does the Walker Trail, what does that mean if it's a
Wait,
check?
hold on 1 second. Before we go into that, so for example, you could see that when I looked at this morning, there were 26 reports. So it looks like there's a new report that came in today, and let's take a look at that. So there's a tree down across the trail, needs chainsaw, and there's location on Hathaway's Pond South.
So to answer your question, Farley, this is all publicly accessible data if you have the internet. So you could just open this up yourself, or a property manager could open it up on their computer and see what's going on in their area.
And ideally, if we have people that I'd mentioned before can subscribe to a different region and be notified by email. If, for example, if I lived on Hathaway's Pond and I subscribed through this app, I would have got an email today that said, hey, there's a tree down. Ideally, these people are getting notified. We want to teach them not only how to properly clear it, make sure you have the proper permission, but how to resolve, enter the new report that says, yep, I cleared it up, so that I don't hike out there next week to do it and it's not there anymore. So we try and
Okay.
not to waste any
So
efforts.
are you experiencing any issues regarding liability, say with the town perhaps? Or
So anytime we send out, we don't encourage our regular users to go out there with a chainsaw. If this is something where, yep, there's a tree down across the trail and 2 strong young men can go and move it off the trail, yeah, go do that. If it involves a chainsaw, I will usually talk to someone in our group, and we have, I don't know what our liability, like $1 million liability limit. Our volunteers are insured so that we're covered if we go out and someone gets hurt cleaning a trailer.
I have a question of the town staff. If there were to be a major incident, we have like one of those horrible ice storms, would these folks get in touch with the town and the DPW would go with heavy equipment, or how?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we have a reporting system set up, and as you know, land can be difficult because of the designation and people not knowing the boundaries, because when you go and walk across a trail, there's no, welcome to Sandwich or welcome to open space or land bank land. So we certainly have a system in which there's many individuals in the town that would look at something like that and devise a plan to do it, absolutely.
How would, like, let's say this that came in today, would I just call town hall and say I'd like to report a tree down on a trail? I wasn't familiar that there was a system here in place.
So what we have is a work order system, and it's the way DPW responds. That's to broken light switch in the conference room. That's that's a leak in my office on the 3rd floor. That happens to be, hey, there's a crack in the sidewalk and somebody could trip over it. But it's also, there's a tree down, there's a bridge that's out, there's a sign that's down, there's a pothole. There's this whole system that's in place, and I believe we actually have a system on our apps that says see it and click it, or click it and ticket. I'm not even sure what it's called.
You're looking at me like
I'm looking at him because
I think you're right, that there's a report of a problem.
So I mean, if you in the general public were to come across an issue like a pothole, you could call it in easily, because we need to be able to rely in a town this big on everyone to kind of help us out.
No, the DPW?
So our DPW would be the muscle, if you will. Grace is more the administration, and the DPW becomes the muscle because they're set up with the equipment and the know-how. And if there was a need for 10 people and heavy-duty equipment and backhoes and things like that, they could assess the situation and get that done. The challenge has always been how to put in a request for a tree down across a path at Hathaway's against any one of 100 other things that have come up within the past 24 hours. So things get triaged based on availability of staff, availability of equipment. We had a situation where there was on one of our backhoes, there was a metal finger that was on one of our pieces of equipment, and it broke, and the part was back ordered, and it was 4 weeks before we could get the part. Well, suddenly you have the only piece of equipment that you have that could do certain things So created a backlog, and then the catch-up was another 3 or 4 weeks. So it can be as simple as that. It could also be as simple as, well, if we're looking at a tree, if half the tree here on Town Green falls down, and we've got Sturgis kids and people here, is that as important as the one at Hathaway's? So we work that out.
And I think that's why we should coordinate together. Obviously, if a big tree falls across the town square, that's not something we're gonna touch. But you have limited resources, and your resources cost money. Our resources are free, and we're willing to offer them if we can find the balance where we can coordinate, where you're comfortable with what we're doing, and we're comfortable with the response time if we're not allowed to do it.
I think we'd like to tap into that, and we've started to have some good working relationships with NEMBA on some of the trails that are there. The idea of clearing for particular use. I mean, many of these trails are considered hiking trails that are also used by people who bike. Dragging a branch out of the way means it's accessible for hiking, but it might not be sufficient for someone on a bike who's coming along at 20 miles an hour and doesn't want to deal.
We don't ride at 20 miles an hour. I think there's a perception that we're moving through the woods at great speeds, and I try to, first of all, I'll invite anyone who wants to come out and ride with us. The average speed on one of our bike rides is about the same speed that a trail runner will run. So we're not going through the woods at great speeds. It's about running speed. So
it's an age thing.
We try to be courteous.
The last time we were out together, I remember those two guys came booking down that hill, and it surprised everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Them and us. So
no, that did happen.
I think it's a coordination. It's about being able to administer this new program, take advantage of the resources that are available. This is change. This is progress. We have to determine how far we can interface this with our work order system. Our GIS is very insulated on purpose, and we want to make sure that we don't in any way compromise that. But at the same time, this is a resource of information that we can't get through our GIS. So we want to be able to tap into what you folks and your folks bring to the table. At the same time, we have conservation, we have open space, we have land bank, we have the Cape Cod Land Bank. We have 3 different ways that open space has been acquired. We have conservation restrictions that sit on many pieces of property. I mean, you think about just dealing with ancient ways and old roads and questionable boundaries and how land was acquired and deeded and under where that sits. We have a tendency to try to vet all of that out, and it can be frustrating on our part at how long it can take. I can only imagine how hard it is. Look, there's a tree across the road. We just want to take it out. Well, you're in the middle of a conservation wetland, and that's going to be a challenge because now we have to involve conservation to make sure that they're going to be okay with it. They tend to be very conservative in how they're going to approach that. The idea of relocating a trail is certainly a challenge because sometimes the best way to deal with it is to go around.
These reports have nothing to do.
No, understand.
We're not going to take, I think there should be a trail here on the report. That's not a valid report.
Separate issue, but sometimes if there's a big tree that's down in the wetlands, I mean, you brought up the U.S. Custom House trail that was essentially designed to get away from wetlands. Yeah. And that was a cooperative effort between the town and NEMBA.
I meant to have Dave give credit because the town purchased thousands of dollars of materials for all
Yes, I know, I carried most of them.
as well as for, I believe, the
Permitting
Walker
and
Point deck was
wetlands
also
and- yeah.
purchased by the town, so.
And I think that's a successful collaborative effort that was beyond what you folks would normally do. We had some resources that we could put towards it, and I think the success of that really speaks to taking a look at the land in general and putting in some sort of an improvement that benefited all of the different stakeholders that were there. So I think that was an important and successful way of getting it done. Now, the unfortunate thing, and Lev will tell you, because we spent a lot of time chasing each other by emails and phone calls, it took years to kind of get it done. Bridge Creek was a situation where I think everybody acknowledges it was done quickly, but it probably wasn't done correctly. And the town had something to do with that, because I think people just came in, got it done, and it was, yay, you got it done. But in hindsight, perhaps it should have been done more along the lines of what we did at the US Custom House. That being said, there's an opportunity here to continue to build on our collaboration. This particular software may inform us, and we have to find a way to be able to bring that information into our system, whether that's electronically or whether that's through an administrator or something along those lines, and then we'll figure that out. So this is good to see. And it's an interesting question. If we did have a hurricane that came through.
Yeah, that's what
I mean, we have
winter cane.
We have a standing issue with DPW as if, you got another Bob hurricane, even a category 2. Where do we put all of the brush that it falls in everybody's yards? That is a volume of brush that would fill the landfill. And yet we can't use the landfill because it's a capped landfill governed by DEP. So where would you literally put all of that? It was a little bit like when we got the 4-foot snowstorm back in 2005. We needed special permission to put snow at Calmus in the parking lot because of all the runoff. There's a process, and sometimes that process, we're familiar with it, and from an outside looking in, it's like, why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so long? So maybe we've done a bad job in kind of explaining why it takes so long. But I think we can build on this.
Were there any other, I feel like you had a question before I cut you off, sorry.
The Walker Point Trail has a check next to it.
Yeah,
Does
so-
that mean it's been?
No, I mentioned earlier that this is not our software, and we've sort of tweaked it to use it differently. So the way they designed their software was, you would enter a trail report, and then you would create an issue off that report. Now, I don't need to go too far on this road. After you created the issue, and that's what the check mark is, this was designed to have specific people to work on these projects. The issue would get assigned to an individual. Since we're crowdsourcing this, we don't have individuals to assign it to.
Okay.
That issue got created, and I just closed it because we don't use issues for our purposes.
Okay.
Can I uncheck it?
No, it'll just stay gray.
No,
Yeah.
we can't make it nice.
I have another question, Grace. I think it might be helpful for the public for you to explain the GIS mapping that the town is doing on the trails is a public safety issue. In terms of were someone to be injured on the trail,
Certainly part of it, of course.
that's a big part of the town's mapping. Is from a public safety perspective.
Yes. In terms, I mean, I can't speak to what GIS is doing beyond that. I know that they are going through the mapping. They've done extensive work. I connected with Alicia on this last week, and she's implemented a lot of great trail networks. Her and Chris have been working very diligently to get out there, and I don't know the percentage of what they've mapped, but it's been significant.
Yeah.
And they've been working very hard, but I don't want to speak for them.
Sure, I understand.
Perhaps inviting them here to speak on their progress would be
Grace,
good.
may I ask you a question on that? Do you know what they're using for their source? For example, I mentioned that we have 160 miles of map trails in Barnstable. If your GIS people are just mapping what the town considers to be official, approved trails, you're probably gonna get 30 miles of trails. In order to address the safety issue, and it's sort of a slippery slope here, even unofficial trails, in my opinion, should be mapped such that, I mean, we've had incidents like this before where someone has had a medical emergency and they may refer to what I consider our comprehensive maps and say, I'm here, I'm on this trail, help. And then the town maps. So I guess my question is the new GIS inventory, how are they determining what belongs? Are they just walking and saying, oh, there's a trail there, I'm gonna walk and map that?
No, there's a certain process to it. I know that I have talked to GIS about Trail Forks because we're aware of this program. There's an indiscretion between the technology. Theirs is much more in-depth, and it's a slower process because it's more in-depth. So they haven't adopted this format because, one, open source and what's considered official versus unofficial. I'm not certain that they would be inclined to map unofficial trails because they're unofficial for a reason. I don't think they want people walking or using that land because to implement a pathway.
No, and I certainly understand that from the town's perspective, but from the perspective of safety,
Well, I
you
think,
know, if I'm on a trail and it exists, I know it exists and I have a heart attack there, I want it to be on my map and I want to be able to communicate to that someone at the West Barnstable Fire Station.
Well, that's one of the reasons why there's an effort to close a number of those trails. And there's a large chunk of those 160 miles worth of trails that have appeared over the past 20 years.
Sure.
How they got there is kind of irrelevant. They are there, and we've spent as much time defining and measuring trails as we have closing trails officially and regretfully. And that we talked about this, you know, you close trails by bringing brush across them, and then somebody puts in a trail fork message, and then somebody goes out and moves it.
No, that's.
So, you know, I mean, it's a vicious
We've been involved
cycle.
with the town officially, our volunteers closing trails.
Yep.
Putting in concrete signs.
Yep.
Brushing them out.
Yep. It's not perfect, but it's better than it was. And perhaps while it's better than it was, there's still some room for us to continue to work on this.
Yep.
I feel like we have to move from a position of authority and strength from a town standpoint. It's a little bit like the private road, public road standpoint. Until a road is accepted by the town, it is a private road, and that brings with it a whole host of obligations.
Yep.
A driver who's driving through, who's here from Braintree, doesn't know if it's a private road or a public road. So if they get into an accident, that whole accident takes on a whole different element when it's on private road versus public road, and is it maintained, and who's responsible for that, and how come it's not wide enough, and how come there's a pothole on it. It's a little bit like a trail that hasn't been formally accepted by the town.
All the more reason to have some coordination between, we're not held by the liability rules that you are. We can put a little deer trail on our maps if it's on public, you know, if it's in conservation land, publicly accessible land, whereas you may not want to do that. But between the two of us, hopefully, if everybody knows what is out there for resources, for example, we met with the West Barnstable Fire Station a couple of years ago after a tragic incident, and I think we acquainted them with some of our GIS stuff in our maps, so that when someone called in and said, I'm on this trail, they were able to find them.
I know that Ed Hoops and Conservation has been working on blazing efforts for people to follow the official trails as not to linger off, and we've been working with GIS again to remap them, to put new maps out like we've been working on,
I
so
think-
people can
all right.
have them. I know what you're saying, but I also think we're trying to navigate to the official trails, and this could be good for closing down trails that necessarily shouldn't be open if it can
I
hurt
am
habitat.
vehemently, what's that word? I don't think you should close any trails.
Duly noted.
Okay.
There are, I'd just like to say there are environmentally sensitive areas that,
Well, I would-
with either rare animals or rare species that I think that we have to be aware of. That the Treasure Trail was a perfect example. We were not only moving that trail off of private land, a section of it across private land, but there were endangered species there, and that was a very necessary use. And
I retract that last statement. There are certainly examples where.
I just do want to say that and conservation is absolutely the commission that would handle. You know, we have a rare or endangered plant or animal on a property that we don't want people in that area.
So I think maybe this tees up an open question to Lev and this board. I mean, the Open Space Committee is way more than just mountain bike trails. NEMBA has its sweet spot, and you guys do some great work. How does this all jive together? Because from an asset management standpoint, we've got a lot of land in this town. We have a lot of property-related issues, a bunch of which fall in here, you know, seeing to it. You talk about, we support conservation. Not all the conservation is necessarily here, but there's some overlap. we wanna make sure that we're in line with what this particular advisory committee to the town manager is geared up to do and what your priorities are. And this is one, certainly it's one. The pathways is really kind of meant as hiking trails that get to be used by multiple sources of people.
That's a good point.
So I think we want to help support the Pathways program while at the same time acknowledging that there's other stakeholders. So I think that's kind of an open question for us with this change of leadership from Ann to Leb, certainly with the change of mission a couple of years ago into this new mission. We want to know what it is that you expect from us and what are some of the issues that we can support you in your pursuit of fulfilling the promise of your committee.
Right. Well, I mean, the reason, I invited Dave here tonight is I kind of feel that a point I make to several people is that there are no mountain bike trails in Barnstable. There are trails that some mountain bikers like to use as well. There are some cases where they have different user groups in the different towns and people work through that. We do have hiker-only trails in Barnstable on Barnstable Land Trust land. But as far as the rest of the land where passive recreation is permitted, a bicycle that doesn't have an electric motor or any motor is by law passive recreation. So we're just trying to, I guess, take advantage of the resources that NEMBA has to help keep the trails open for all. And that's kind of the viewpoint that, I wanted to bring to the board, but I'd be curious to hear what others have to say as well.
Okay, I am very encouraged by the NIMBA's participation and their interest in the pathways, but I will take exception to keeping every last little game trail open. And have it be on a map so people can go, oh, there's a trail there, and then get lost, It's happened to me more than once, if I get off on a little funny trail and I think, oh, I bet it goes there, and it doesn't, So I frankly feel like the more opportunities you offer people, the more opportunities you have for trouble. So in some ways, I think that most people who like to go out and walk in the woods want a nice, clear, well-designed, well-signed trail to follow. They don't want to kind of wander around like, trying to thrash about in the woods. For mountain bikers, maybe you have a different outlook on things, but for me as a, pedestrian, as a person who likes to hike, and who has been very, has seen a lot of people on a lot of walks, they want security, they want a sense of, guidance and support when they're out there, if they're gonna really enjoy themselves.
Wouldn't that be the reason to put all the trails on the map, though?
Yeah.
Well, what I find is if I'm on a trail and I see an intersection, I'm an avid hiker and I like to explore. Sometimes I may say, I'm gonna see where that goes.
Sure.
But if I have a map and I can say, oh, that just goes into somebody's backyard, I realize instantly that's not a desirable outcome for my hike. I'm gonna stay on this trail.
Sure.
So the maps inform me to make my decisions.
How accurate can you be following each and every little game trail that you come across?
When you say accuracy, what do you mean?
Well, are you gonna follow each trail to its terminus? How are you gonna?
We already have.
You have
And
every
it's been
single
mapped and they've been corrected and
Okay.
correlated to user data, hikers, to LiDAR data from airplanes flying over. Like our trails are probably within plus or minus 3 feet. And I don't think that Grace's GIS people are gonna get much better.
I see what you're doing as a great asset, frankly. I don't have any objection at all to what he's doing. I think it's a great resource for anybody who wants to use it. And I applaud you for doing this. I think it's terrific.
So Farley, you had a great walk during the walking weekend. out in West Barnstable. And I don't know if that's a good example, but a lot of the trails did have the confirmation signage
Yeah,
where
right.
part of that adaptive cycling effort was able to put those in to help people navigate their way
Right.
around the trails. So is that kind of the example that you would use as good trails?
Yes, I would. And, but I also, I think I want to discourage random trail breaking and that sort of thing, so I don't necessarily.
We also do, and
Okay,
Every proposal
Yeah,
I
that's-
write,
and I
I
wasn't
say,
making that
we want to
assumption.
avoid new intersections.
Yeah.
Because that causes confusion. So if there's any work being done, it should be at an existing intersection.
yeah. No,
Whatever you're
I mean,
doing.
I'd say that by and large, you certainly have my support, but I think that it has to be managed in a fairly, holistic approach, so.
Yeah, there should, this is still a wildlife habitat too, and,
but the trails are there now.
yeah.
And some of these areas like West Barnstable Conservation Area, there's a lot of users there. And ideally, you want to distribute your users for the experience, as well as maybe separating mountain bikers from hikers. We're actually advocates for signage, for kiosks. The biggest, we're all on the same team here.
Yeah, no, I think it's just some fine
But
tuning.
I'm gonna tell you who the enemy is now.
Okay.
Our concern is that the main problem is illegal motorized vehicle use. So
Always has been.
the majority of these trails were created by motorized vehicles. That's how they got there in the first place. And I tell you that because I can actually see them with the LiDAR data, essentially from space. Because they have been drilled in by motorized vehicles, takes one rainstorm, you get erosion, to the point where now they're not even usable for hikers, bikers, they're not usable for any of us. That's the problem here, and we're advocates for signage and benches because we want, one of our mottos is, the more legal users we can get into these conservation areas, the less illegal users there will be. So, and signage performs that task, putting a bench, having things on maps. If something's not on a map and a young kid's on his motorcycle, he's like, this is my own little nirvana. No one knows what's going on here, and I'm gonna tear it up.
Yeah, oh no, I've experienced it firsthand.
Yeah.
Several times. Okay, and I think part of it in that West Barnstable Conservation Area, the Crooked Cartway area, where I think gates were left open by the people that were working on the power line. And, kids were
Yeah.
roaring up and down the road. And
No, ATV use has
Yeah.
always been an issue.
And I'm gonna stop talking soon, but gates are not the answer either, because what we've realized is if you put a gate up, they're now gonna cut a new trail.
Yeah.
So you're perpetuating the problem. There has to be other ways to solve that problem. We have some solutions, and among them are signage, more legal users,
Okay,
proper
so
maps.
are you finding that the people that are you reporting any of these abusers or?
So our organization did an investigation in Falmouth in February.
Yeah.
You may be familiar with the Moraine Trail, which is just an iconic hiking trail in Falmouth. It's about 11 miles long, the old Indian trail. So we put out a trail cam on the Moraine Trail, which is primarily hiking. And at some point, I'll share it with you. But I have a video, a 2-minute elapsed period in which 16 dirt bikes in elapsed 2 minutes go by, and it's the Moraine Trail. You can see the blazes. If I look at the video footage before and after, I see a family with a baby in a carriage, in a holder. I see a hiking group go by, and then in another 2 minutes, in the 2 minutes of elapsed period of time, I see 16 motorcycles go by. So we documented this. We determined what patterns they had, when they rode. We had identified, or not identified, but 60 pictures of individual different motorcycle people and presented it to law enforcement, and I couldn't even get a response back in an email. I've had some meetings with the
Yeah,
300
it's-
committee in Falmouth to discuss this, and Will Poirier is the new stewardship manager. I think him and I are gonna work on it a little more.
I know,
But
it's just.
we've done
uh,
investigations and we've presented,
Yeah.
and a lot of law enforcement has thrown their hands up because they can't pursue. And the scofflaws know they don't have tags on their bikes. They're wearing full face helmets. They're unidentifiable. And I think there was a case where Nina Coleman at West Barnstable actually had an individual on a motorcycle standing next to her, and she confronted him and he just turned tail and left, and she couldn't identify him.
Yeah.
She would have.
Can we leave it that?
No, it's,
We will
I'm at
continue to
that
have
point.
I know.
discussions and conversations with NIMBUS specifically as well
Yeah,
as
maybe
many
it's time that
stakeholder
we could
groups.
come in and have another chat.
Absolutely.
I think we can do that and then report back, or through you, you can report back to open space. I know you've got a full agenda and don't want to lose that.
All right, so thanks, everybody. I'm gonna just move along a little bit. We can always revisit. We do have Kyle with us from planning, and going to talk about the open space recreation plan update.
Hello, everybody. Kyle Pedicini, Assistant Director for the Planning Department. So we're looking to do an update of the open space and recreation plan for the town of Barnstable. The last one was done in 2018. So they're good for 7 years, so they'll expire next year. So it's time for an update. So we're looking to get a consultant on board to help us with that. We've already made a request through the CPC for funding for the consultant, $50,000. We're also seeking grant funding to offset that, trying to get a $20,000 grant from the state, which would mitigate how much we'd need from CPC. So CPC approved of our request and referred it to town council. It'll be heard in January. So I'm just here before you guys with a draft of the scope of work to make sure you guys are comfortable with the path forward. I would note that it does include stakeholder interviews with different committees. First one on the list is the open space committee, so you guys would be intimately involved. Since the CPC was the one who awarded the funding, we'll probably look to have the CPC chairman serve on the RFP evaluation committee to help us get the right consultant. So I'd look to you guys if your committee would like to designate a representative to also serve on that evaluation committee to make sure we're all comfortable with the consultant that we get. I'd be happy to do that. I believe you have a draft of the scope of work, which outlines exactly what we're looking to do. This would go out through a request for proposals, and we'd be looking to get a consultant on board probably late January or early February, with trying to get the plan done by the end of August. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. I know, do we need an action or a vote? Does anybody have any questions?
is there supposed to be a review of like kind of a call to action items?
Action items?
Yeah, was that done? I think maybe Chris brought that up.
She did.
Just to see, what did we accomplish from the previous one?
Yeah, certainly this update, the very first step would be taking a look at the last plan.
Yeah.
Seeing what we've accomplished, what needs to be updated.
Okay.
That's what we.
So is that something we would then do with the consultant?
Yeah.
Is
So we kind of like guide the consultant on their work, tell them what we want them to focus on. So in this case, it's updating. It's not gonna be a full rewrite. We have a pretty good plan in 2018. It's just updating the information, making sure we follow up on the actions that were outlined on that. If they weren't completed, why weren't they?
Right.
So stuff like that, where it's a very similar process to what we did with the local comprehensive plan, which we're now in year 3 of doing with the town. But in the very beginning, we looked at the old plan and evaluated, what was done.
In the meantime, everyone has, I believe, access to the existing plan. You've all been able to see all the appendices and everything?
Yep. So I think
I didn't get a
was
printed copy
one
because it could be, I could mark it up.
comment that Chris had made about tightening it up, making it smaller in some ways.
Definitely.
Because it's
kind of a tourist.
You have a 500-page report that doesn't really help
Yeah.
a whole lot, and we feel the same way with local comprehensive plan. So if you have 1,000 priority actions, do you really have any priority actions? So,
Yeah.
duly noted, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, do you want to designate me to be on that committee?
Go right ahead.
So just to clarify, the committee is for the RFP, so when we put out the RFP, we get a certain amount of responses. And there'd be a committee set up to evaluate the responses to figure out who basically rates the highest amongst our criteria. So that's what we'd be looking for, a member of that committee,
Okay.
basically, so,
I guess the consensus is I'll help out.
excellent. Sounds good, we'll be in touch then.
Man.
Okay, no objections. Okay, thank you, Kyle.
Alright, thank you.
Now we just have a few little items to check in on if there's any update. Senator Cranberry Bog,
Centerville Cranberry Bog, two parties are still in conversation.
okay, so stand by and stay tuned.
Stand by.
Okay, Comaquid Woods, I see we have folks from,
We have a few of us here, and you just see my pretty face, or not so pretty.
Thought you'd bring
I agree
them.
with that.
So, as far as the update, I was sorry I couldn't be here for the last meeting, but here I am now. Since the last meeting, we have been able to walk the property at 87 Oakmont, which is Cobb Trust land. And we did that with the trustees, okay. And we did that with the members of the Barnstable Land Trust and the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trust. So they were able to see the land firsthand, which was very nice, and to evaluate it in terms of, they were looking at things that I wouldn't know to look at, such as invasive plants and the terrain, and we did find that there is a trail at the Route 6 end of the land.
it's on the mapping already.
It
And
seems
so
to be
we,
primarily used by dirt bikes.
yeah, we think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a challenging trail with a very steep, a lot of
Yeah.
boulders in there.
Yeah, it is very rugged terrain, and that was, somewhat surprising and yet not, because we live on the other end of it and we sort of see it from our end, but anyway. So beyond that, an offer was made of $800,000 on the Cobb Trust land. And unfortunately, the asking price was $850,000, and unfortunately that was not accepted. So, we go forward from there. I've spoken to Lindsay, and he's still very interested in the property, and we've kept in touch. This was fairly recent, so anyway, we've kept in touch, and I am still working with everybody involved, my group and the others, and looking for a way forward. We are still now going to still be doing some fundraising strategies, slightly different, but we haven't given up. We're still there.
Good.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Have you talked to Mark Robinson at all?
I'm sorry.
Have you
That's the
talked-
compact, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So Mark walked it with you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but sometimes he can do like a bridge loan, you know.
That's what I said. We're looking at what happens next. We had a strategy and it could have worked, but at this point, that didn't work.
Okay,
At least it's stalled. I
Yeah.
shouldn't say it didn't work, it's stalled.
okay.
So I'm not gonna say never.
Right,
It's not over.
so I just change course.
Yeah. So it's, from my notes from the last CPC meeting, there were some, made mention of the fact that that property is part of the Enoch Trust.
Yes, thank you for, that's on my notes, I'm not
Yeah,
trying
so
to-
it benefits the school children of the town. So I guess they feel as though they really want every last dollar they, if they ask for $850,
They
they're
want
gonna,
$850.
they want $850. And it's, has a historic aspect as it is the last parcel owned by the Enoch
Yes,
Trust.
yeah, I thought that was a very good point that Lindsay
Yeah.
made, something that I had thought but never thought to bring it up, but yeah, there is a certain amount of that, and whether there's maybe some kind of way to make note of that, you know, regarding the future of the property, I don't know,
Yeah,
but certainly worth noting.
yeah.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Outstanding conservation restrictions, I don't have anything on that subject. We'll skip over the next one, nothing new to report. Tracy's not here, percent to it. But we did, David and I walked out there with Tracy looking at some of the issues that Mashpee is having some concerns with ladder, whatever you call it. With
Are they moving to replace it?
it's more about the impacts, I think, of the motorcycles are coming through that area, so. NEMBA's gonna be meeting with Dan Ken on other Mashpee issues in the new year, and so, to see if there's anything that they can do to help. Let's see, Farley, anything on open space applications?
Yeah, a letter of intent was received by, from the BLT requesting $1,350,000 in support of their appraised fair market value acquisition of the property located at 30 and 31 Crocker's Neck Road, totaling 10.62 acres.
This is the former golf course?
Yes, it is, right, it still is.
Still a golf course, yeah.
Yeah, so they're, let's see, yeah, so it's a very appealing,
Katuitt High Ground Golf.
Yeah.
I went and walked it with Lindsay
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
couple
It's a
weeks ago.
classic, oh, I
Yeah.
love it, yeah.
okay. So anyhow, they're working on it right now, so it's, they're looking, BLT is trying to get some grant money to help offset the CPC funding that they're looking for, and so it got moved on to a full application status. So we'll see that again. But that looks like a very nice project, you know, for them. BLT's done a lot of good stuff.
Good hot dogs.
Yeah.
Now you're making me hungry.
Yeah.
So Chris is not here, she had other things she had to do, but I think we are at the end.
Okay.
Can I entertain a motion to adjourn? I can,
Second.
in a second. Thank you, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.